Hey, good Tuesday morning, everybody. Welcome to the Volquest podcast. I am Eric Kane with Brent Hubbs, Grant Ramey, and Rob Lewis. Appreciate you guys for being here. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit this like button and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us, we appreciate you. And as always, we thank you for checking out Volquest.com and the Volquest podcast, which is presented by Exterior Home Solutions. If you need roofing, siding, windows, or garage, contact Exterior Home Solutions today. They've been local and trusted since 1999. That phone number for a free estimate is at 865-524-5888, or you can visit them online at exteriorhomesolutions.com. We got a fun show coming up. We are going to open up Texas A&M week. What a massive football game at Neyland Stadium coming up this weekend. We're going to have David Nuno on from Tex Ags here in about 5 minutes. He's going to bring us an A&M perspective. We're going to take a look around the SEC. But first, before we get into our special guest, we'll just kind of open this week. Brent Hubbs, it's a big one. Tennessee, a daunting month of October, coming off the bye week. You got A&M at home. You got Alabama on the road. You got Kentucky on the road. It feels like this is one at home that you need to go ahead and take care of because we know about the struggles UT has experienced on the road here of late, dating back to last year.
Well, I mean, I think that when you looked at the schedule, you had a couple of toss-up games in there. One was Florida. Could you go on the road and win? Because that had just been such a house of horrors, Grant. And the other one was A&M at home because A&M's got a wealth of talent. They're plenty talented to win anywhere, even though they've struggled on the road as well. But this was, to me, has always been a toss-up game between these two teams when you look at the talent that A&M brings to the table, Grant.
I think it's one of those things – when you talk about going to Gainesville and winning, Hub says all the time, I need to see to believe it. The way Tennessee's played at home the last however long it's been, since November 2021, I guess at this point, you almost have to see Tennessee play poorly at home and lose a home game before you really think it's going to happen or you predict it's going to happen or you envision it happening because they've been so good at home and the home crowd has been so good and the home field advantage has been so strong. So we saw what Texas A&M was able to do to Alabama with a home crowd at its back. Now it's going to see what Texas A&M looks like on the road, and obviously, like Eric mentioned, what their road record has been the last, I don't know, what is it, 8 true road games now at this point or something like this. It also goes back to, I think, October 2021 at Missouri, if I'm not mistaken. So that combined with the streak Tennessee's ride at home, I would expect the home field to make a difference in what feels like a toss-up game.
Rob, I'm curious to ask this and get everybody's thoughts. Eric, jump in here too. Is it just me, or does it feel like home field advantages are greater right now than we've seen in the past? Or is that just magnified because Tennessee has had some offensive struggles on the road? Is that how you view it? Or do you think that the home field advantage in this league is maybe better than it's ever been when you see that the way teams seem to be struggling on the road for the most part?
I don't really disagree with you, however, but I'd have to have Grant Ramey compile some more data for me to look at other than just Tennessee and the SEC. He's doing it right now. He's not looking up. But I mean, I think there's something to that, but I also think we're close to it. We see, how bad Tennessee was at the Swamp, or how much they struggled, last year at Georgia with an even, a better offensive football team. So I mean, I don't disagree with you. I just don't know that I've got a wide enough sample size to say uniformly that's the case across the country.
Of course, then Eric, you look at it. LSU wins on the road this past weekend. Alabama wins on the road this past weekend. Georgia wins on the road everywhere they go. Obviously, this wasn't this past weekend, but maybe it's not the case, right?
Well, I just think for Tennessee's perspective, Tennessee hadn't been very good for the majority of the past 15 years or whatever. Now, Tennessee is good, and so whenever you travel, those fan bases, those student sections, they're going to get up for this game. And plus, Tennessee does so much at the line of scrimmage. I mean, there's a lot of teams don't huddle anymore, but Tennessee does so much at the line of scrimmage in that tempo, and so I think that that type of environment, Grant, can often be a hindrance for Tennessee, and unfortunately at Georgia and at Florida earlier this year, we've kind of seen that. So I think home field advantage for sure is, Brent, to your point, it's been huge for a lot of teams that Tennessee's been playing. And that's why I think the emphasis really, you got to ball out this week if you're that home crowd, just like you did against South Carolina. It was loud a couple weeks ago. Grant, that's the environment Tennessee needs for that 3:30 CBS kickoff. Checker Neyland. All the fireworks are here, and Tennessee needs to have that home field environment.
I think college football wise or SEC wise, maybe, I think it just feels so wide open. And maybe that's the NIL era and the transfer portal era where it's going to be a little bit more kind of wide open every year. And there's not going to be such elite teams that we've seen the last decade or so. I think Tennessee specifically, maybe why they've been so good at home under the Heupel era is because, A, they started so fast consistently last year. And when you get 14, 21 points early on and get the crowd in it and keep them in it, it's hard to come back against from a multi-touchdown deficit to begin with, but in that atmosphere with that crowd against that crowd, it's even more difficult to do so. And just the explosive big plays. I mean, the way they can score, the way Tennessee has scored the last couple seasons under Heupel with those big explosive plays at home, the sellout streak they've had, all this stuff going on, the way it all kind of comes together, they're just a really, really tough team to beat at home.
We're going to have David Nuno from Texags on here in just a couple of minutes, but I do think if Tennessee, and again, we say this about every single game, okay, but for Tennessee to find success, you got to be able to run the football. However, A&M has gone from worst to first in terms of rush defense. Really, really good against the run. 84 yards on average is what this team has given up on the ground per opponents. Josh Heupel was asked about that Monday in his press conference about the emphasis of running the football and the difficulties there. Here's what Tennessee head coach Josh Heupel had to say about running the football against Texas A&M.
Stopping the run, they're good at getting after the quarterback too. First of all, they got really good skill, and when I say that, I'm talking about their big skill up front too. They're physical, they're dynamic, they're thick, they play strong, they're multiple up front. They've created a bunch of negative yardage plays in the run game, and that's given them the ability to go get after the quarterback, second and long, third and long too. So. You got to do a great job in communication. You got to win some one-on-ones when you're in a one-on-one. Your double team's got to be good enough to change the way the line of scrimmage looks too. So big test for us up front and across the board offensively.
You look at Florida. Tennessee could not run the football at Florida. You're going to need to run the football in this game, and that's not just the five up front. That's the tight ends. That's the wide receivers. Brent Hubbs, you got to be able to block well, and Tennessee needs to establish the run in order to where you're not one-dimensional and having just your passing game the only thing that you can do against a defense like A&M.
Well, I watched more football on Saturday than I probably have watched in the last 3 years combined outside of a Tennessee game. I watched everything that was on TV. I mean, I watched Wyoming and Fresno State. If it was on TV, I was watching. I watched part of Army and Boston College on Saturday. So I watched a ton of football. Here's what –
Sounds like a big day for Tracy Hubbs, Grant.
She's not in town. Not in town.
That's why he was allowed to do that.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's why I got to watch.
That
right?
makes sense now.
So here's where I come away with that. One, quarterback legs are just invaluable in college football. And it's not just Grant calling run plays for the quarterback. It's the quarterback making a quick decision and turning a potential negative play into a 2-yard gain or a 4-yard gain. I think in this game, Joe Milton's legs have to show up. Now, I don't think he's got to run for 150 yards, but he's got to avoid the big-time negative play with his legs. The other thing, too, and this may be the harder challenge for Josh Heupel, is he can't forget about his run game, particularly when it's not going well. And you go back and look at that second quarter at South Carolina, 12 passes, 1 running back carry. That was after 90 yards rushing in the first quarter. I mean, they just kind of forgot about it. They're going to have to be a little bit stubborn running the football, and the quarterback's going to have to help them out, I think, Grant, this weekend.
I think, they have to consistently do it. I think they got to consistently get Dylan Sampson involved. I think they got to split it pretty evenly like they have in most games, not including Florida, obviously. With Florida, just the way they got down, it felt like they abandoned the run game. It's a little more, concerning that it happens after that first quarter against South Carolina based on the way they ran it the first quarter and then the split that Hubbs is talking about in the second quarter. With Joe, I think running, he's just got to have a better feel. He's got to get that 3 to 5 to make it second and medium or third and manageable instead of second and 12 and playing behind the sticks like Heupel talks about all the time. And I think that's where Joe's got to improve the most the second half of the season is that feel to not be that running quarterback that Hendon Hooker was all the time or, an 81-yard touchdown like he had against UTSA, but just getting that 3 to 5 and making that next snap a little bit more manageable.
Yeah, see, I think that's huge because, staying on schedule always, but against this Texas A&M team, they're disruptive up front. They got three of the top 10 guys in the SEC in tackles for losses. They had either 5 or 6 sacks on Saturday against Alabama, one of the two. And I mean, they can get you off schedule in a hurry. So I think Tennessee has to be stubborn. What Grant's talking about, Joe's got to not take a 3-yard loss, even if it's going to be a 2-yard gain. Because, 2nd and 8 beats the heck out of 2nd and 12.
It's going to be a big quarterback matchup, going to be a big defensive matchup, all that 3:30 Eastern time at Neyland Stadium, CBS game of the week. And, of course, we'll have all that coverage at Volquest.com. From the Texas A&M side, that's going to be at TexAgs.com. And here to join us on the Volquest podcast is David Nuno. And really appreciate you, David, joining the show. Huge game coming up, and obviously it's a big one for Tennessee. It's going to be a big one for Texas A&M coming off that home loss to Alabama. What's this kind of feel like, this matchup here in the early week as Texas A&M will head to Knoxville for what should be a good one?
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on, and I apologize if the lighting doesn't look too good here. Look, this is a fork in the road moment for Texas A&M. There's no doubt about that. I know Tennessee still has a chance to really rectify their season, but A&M hasn't won a road game since a real road game since Missouri 2021. A&M has not shown an ability to stop an aerial attack. Tennessee can do that. Tennessee's great at home. Tennessee can run the ball well, something that A&M has done phenomenally stopping the run this year. All that being said, it is a huge moment for A&M because, you lost to Miami on the road early on trying to figure out your defense. You thought you got to figure it out. But then Jalen Milroe looks like Tom Brady connecting with Randy Moss, connecting every pass he needed to do, especially down the field. So what Joe Milton and that offense can certainly do, I think it's very scary for A&M. But I do think if they are able to find a way to win this game, most of everything we had envisioned for this program for this year in particular is still there. There is still a world where this team could win 9 or 10 games in the regular season. But if you don't win on the road in the SEC, it ain't happening. You know that. And that's something that's going to be a huge, huge challenge for sure.
David, I'm curious about this A&M defense. I mean, we know about the defensive front and how good they are. I was a little surprised at how crowded the box was defensively. They didn't, there were a lot of single safety high looks for Jalen Milroe. I thought made the field a little easier to read. What's the story on the A&M secondary, and kind of how have they played, the pass game throughout the year?
They've struggled. They have absolutely struggled. And their only 2 tests have come against, I thought Arkansas would be a test, but that offensive line was no match for the A&M defensive front, right? So when they're able to put on pressure the way they were able to do in the first half of the Alabama game, the way they did in the Auburn game, the Arkansas game, it's really hard to throw on this team when they're able to do that. But as you saw, Alabama, they made some changes. They were able to, A&M still got in the backfield. They still had a really good second half getting to the quarterback. But the secondary has struggled. And it has struggled against Miami, where Tyler Van Dyke, who they did not pressure at all. He was sacked twice in that game, but it's not the same defense that you've seen since then. Tyler Van Dyke just was able to dink and duck as much as he wanted. And A&M's defense had a hard time tackling at that point. There was a lot of, you didn't see a lot of the gang tackling you've seen since that point. So if you're Tennessee, and I know you can run the ball well, but I'm throwing on that secondary until they prove they can stop it. The thing is, and I caught this note, I think Joe Milton's only been sacked 5 times this year. I know they haven't taken on a caliber of defensive front that A&M brings, but that is something to watch out for because if A&M is not able to get to Joe Milton, I don't know what that secondary is going to be able to do.
David, has there been a common thread in these road losses over the last couple of years for the streak to be as long as it has at this point? Have they played out in a similar fashion, or has it just been completely different game in and game out?
Well, look, this is not the same team from 2021. The team with 2021 was also on a backup quarterback, but that team was built differently. Last year was a bunch of young players. I mean, that's what you had on the road. A lot of these guys that are starting this year were absolutely too young for the big moment, and you had key injuries. You had key injury to your starting quarterback, which say what you want about Max or say what you want about Haynes King. When you go into a season thinking that's going to be your guy and it goes to the next option for whatever reason, Haynes was initially benched, then Max broke his finger, or his wrist, I should say, and then you have to go with Connor Wigman, but Haynes goes in for a little bit. The changing of the guard certainly has hurt them on the road. I asked Jimbo Fisher about that today, and he says you need a veteran team in the SEC to win on the road, a team that doesn't make the mistakes that A&M has made on several occasions. So to me, it's about cleaning up some of those mistakes. there's no doubt about it. I think this team is this is the biggest moment of the season for them because of what I illustrated earlier. But I think they can get to the quarterback in this game. How many times? I don't know. I don't know if we're going to see the 7-7-6 that we've seen in the last 3 SEC games for Texas A&M. 7 sacks, 6 sacks. But if they can get to Joe Milton, then I think it gives them a chance to win on the road, to quiet the crowd. But again, they've made too many mistakes on the road. They're, even in Miami this year.
David, what's been the biggest difference with the offense and Bobby Petrino with the court after the energy to Wegman and Johnson coming in? Has it been dramatic or, really conservative or not so much?
Hard to say, because when Wegman goes down, look, Max Johnson, I think every team in the SEC would love to have Max Johnson as their backup quarterback. He is that good. He can start on a lot of SEC teams. He's a good quarterback. I think Connor Wegman has the ability to potentially be great. You can win because of Connor. You win with Max, and that's been the biggest drop-off. Look, he holds onto the ball too much. And Alabama, who has a salty defensive line, who came into that game with something to prove because they had read the press clippings all about A&M's defensive line. They got after to Max in the second half, and he held onto the ball too long. That's been the biggest issue. Look, the offense is better than it was last year for multiple reasons. But it's still not groundbreaking, at least in the SEC. Like it's still managing to score about 24 points a game in SEC play. It needs to be better than that. It needs to be, especially when you go to Tennessee, a team that is conditioned and can win a shootout. I don't know if A&M's built that way. And if it goes to a shootout, I don't know if A&M is going to be able to match the wits of a Tennessee. So that's why you want it to not be and move that offense. They've got a ways to go, but they're certainly better than they were last year.
David, you go from worst to first as of right now through 6 games in the SEC in terms of rush defense, allowing, I think, 208 yards on the ground on average a game last year to 84 this year. A lot of football left to be played, but what's been the biggest difference? I mean, why the sudden change? But really across the board, I mean, getting after the quarterback as well, already 26 sacks, only to 19 a season ago.
Yeah, I'm going to give props to DJ Durkin, who's gotten a lot of flack, especially for the way the secondary is played. But he became the linebackers coach, all right? So I think that has helped a lot. Our linebacker play has been significantly better than it was last year, with a little bit of a personnel change. Torian York is a freshman that a lot of people didn't know about, not one of the 5 stars that everybody talks about. They thought they had Harold Perkins a couple years ago. They thought they had other players, right? So the fact that Torian has been able to become a starter and an integral part of what those linebackers do, that's part of it. The other part is McKinley Jackson's healthy all year this year. He was only healthy for part of the year last year. And a gentleman you guys all know, Walter Nolan, is a grown man, right? You get Walter Nolan in there with his ability to get to the quarterback, his ability to plug in. That is part of the reason. You've seen the maturation. We talked about this being a really young team on the road last year. Well, a lot of those young players were on the defensive line last year, and they all got a lot of, baptism by fire by playing against those SEC teams. They have grown up. Like, they faced Bama, who can run the ball. They faced Auburn, who can run the ball. They've done a really good – they faced Rocket Sanders in Arkansas, and they can run the ball. All 3 of those tests, A&M, at least from stopping the run, have looked really good. Quarterbacks haven't been able to run on them either. Again, the problem has just been, can they cover somebody? And if the defensive line isn't getting to quarterbacks, that's where the big issue is.
David, two questions here from me. One, how much does Max being the quarterback on the road, given his experience in the SEC as a starting quarterback, how much comfortability does that give the offense in terms of managing a crowd? Because he's played in a bunch of different venues, obviously, in this league. And 2, DJ Durkin has gone up against Josh Heupel's offense before. He did that at Ole Miss 2 years ago in a win in Knoxville. How much advantage is it, do you think, for this A&M defense in terms of preparation for Tennessee's uniqueness, given that DJ Durkin has already called a game against it once?
Look, DJ Durkin gets a lot of flack, as we've already touched on. But one thing that we learned about that Ole Miss defense, in year 1 at Ole Miss, that defense was a train wreck. In year 2, they struggled in the very first couple of games of the season. I think that Arkansas game, they gave up like 52 points, I think it was, or something close to that amount. And then they became a really good defense throughout without the talent that A&M has on this year's team. I think that goes a long way as this defense continues to play in the familiarity with some of the opponents in the SEC, Tennessee being one of them. I think that does go a long way. Different Tennessee team, obviously. When it comes to Max Johnson, that is where you, again, talk about having a backup quarterback who could start on a lot of programs, who has won on the road, who has taken on these tough environments. This will not be strange for Max Johnson, who has won. And honestly, like he's had a couple turnovers the last few weeks, but since he's last season at LSU and these last couple years here at A&M, he's protected the football very well. Had a bad interception last week against Alabama, which might have been the game changer. I'll be interested, though, because Alabama comes in here and they have 8 false starts. They have 11 penalties, and the crowd had a lot to do with it. The 12th man was really loud. They found a way to win the game. I expect a similar atmosphere there when we go to Neyland. And I think Max has got the temperament to handle that. It's going to be everybody else with him. Can they handle it? And the bottom line is, if you can't protect Max Johnson, if you cannot protect them, they're going to struggle. And I think that's one area that they have to get better at. They will not face a defensive front as good as Bama's this year, although I'm not trying to give discredit to any of the teams they're about to face. The way Alabama played that last game, especially in the second half, that was out of this world good.
You mentioned Saturday as potentially a fork in the road. After a 5-win season last year, kind of where do things sit with Jimbo, and I guess the opinion on him and what he's built there, kind of what it looks like moving forward?
It's all TBD, guys. Like, look, everybody wanted him fired last year. In the SEC, we all know the contract, what it is. This guy recruits at an extremely high level, top 5, top 10 level. Every year, like these last couple of years, because I mean, this program was ascending. Let's not forget he won 9 twice before the 2020 season, where they went 9-1. Their only loss being to Alabama. So there was an ascension. The next year, they lost a lot of seniors, and they had a changing of the guard at quarterback, and he gets hurt, and it goes downhill. And last year was a comedy of errors, it really was. And I think it's happening in the middle of this NIL world, transfer world, where you got these young players that don't, they walk on water, and you had some dudes on that program that just didn't fit the culture that they were trying to establish. Fast forward to this year, look. We expect no less than 9 or 8 wins this year, and that's low. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, this program did not sign up for 9 or 8 wins. There keeps being this, but what if? But what if you get a defensive line that can stop the run? Well, they answered that what if. What if you can get an offense that moves the ball? Well, for a while before the second half of the Alabama game, it felt like you were moving in that direction with Bobby Petrino. Well, what if? And now the newest what ifs are: can you protect Max Johnson and not lose another quarterback? And what if you had a secondary that worked? Jimbo's got more grace than people think because of that contract and because of his ability to recruit. But let's be honest, every program in the SEC, you can only have so many down years, right? Like, every coach, if it doesn't look like it's going to happen for Alabama, but if Alabama went 7-5 this year, at one point some people were saying that was a possibility. Doesn't look like it anymore because they are Alabama. People are going to be saying, has the game passed by Nick Saban? Jimbo's contract is a part of the reason he's still here. The other part is that guy recruits at an elite level. He has won a national championship. He's got the 4th best. A&M, since entering the SEC, has the 4th best record in the entire conference since joining. They just have nothing to show for it. No conference championships, no division championships. Things have to change. I just don't know, unless it's another bottom-out season, that we're going to be talking about that, at least here locally.
And David, last thing from me, just Bobby Petrino was probably that hire probably generated as many headlines as any assistant coach in the country last winter. What's the impact of that hire been like? And maybe is it not fair because of the quarterback injuries to even kind of talk about it?
Well, I mean, look, let's play this game for a minute. I know that you guys were pretty happy with the quarterback room there in Tennessee, but you can look at almost any team in the country, right? Alabama has some quarterback issues, but if Tyler Buchner was their starting quarterback, are they a potentially 11-win team? I don't think so. You look at most teams in the SEC or most teams in the country that are on their backup quarterback, their chances of winning 8 or 9 games or 10 games goes out the window. I think with Max Johnson, you still have a chance for that, but the offense isn't a finished product. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter if it's a finished product. It wasn't a finished product in 21. It wasn't a finished product in 22. Unfortunately, it's not a finished product here in 23. You got to get through that. You got to figure out why your quarterbacks keep getting hurt and why they're getting hurt early on. You've got to protect your quarterbacks. The offense is better than it was last year, but it was so bad last year. That's the bare minimum. I wish we were having this conversation leading into the Bama game because everything felt much better. But you know how it is. You lose a game, the water tastes bad, the coffee's cold. You get more.
We know how
lights.
it is.
Yeah. So sitting here today, I mean, look, I think it's better. I like the play calling better. It's more creative. you just lost to a team that is having a down year that may still win 11 games, or may win 10 games at the worst, the way their schedule is going to play out. It doesn't feel as good after that game, but it's certainly, and everybody around the country, especially when Connor was talking about A&M's a different team, and they could potentially still be one of those different teams, but it does start this weekend.
David, great stuff, man. Really appreciate you joining our show and giving us a great perspective of Texas A&M, the secondary, the offensive line, the quarterback, the play calling, all that and more. Should be a good one, 3:30 Eastern time at Neyland Stadium, the CBS game of the week. And David, from an A&M perspective, what do you guys have going on over there at Texags this weekend or this week?
Well, it's busy. We'll be doing all of our shows. We had Feinbaum on today with his ties to Tennessee. We have Gary Danielson coming on later on in the week. It's just a busy show here at Texac. Well, we do focus 90% of our efforts on A&M, but we do some SEC coverage as well. And Eric, you've been a part of that coverage. So it'll be busy. We'll head out there I think we're flying into Chattanooga on Friday afternoon, and we'll be there ready for the game. And it'll be my first time there. This year, I'm not going on every road trip, but this is one of the ones I said I have to be at. I'm looking forward to it because I've heard so many great things about going there, and I can't wait to see it and see you all too as well.
Absolutely, man. It'll be one for the books. At least that is the hope. David Nuno, TexAgs.com. Appreciate it, man, and we'll see you this weekend.
Thank you, guys.
All right, we'll continue on here on the Volquest podcast. Really good stuff there from David Nuno. Hope you guys enjoyed that. We'll come back. We'll talk a little bit more A&M. We'll look around the SEC. That and a whole lot more as we continue on here on the Volquest podcast. Do want to remind you guys about our friends, a proud sponsor of the show. That is Game Time. And the thing with Game Time is, hey, you really shouldn't have to worry about buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time, it's a fast and easy way to buy all your tickets to not only your sporting events, but music, theater, comedy, whatever event is in your area. Game Time is the place to buy those last-minute deals. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views of your seats, the best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. You guys know we have a lot going on here in East Tennessee, specifically in Knoxville. Tennessee football, Tennessee basketball, baseball, all the sports there, but also TBA, the Food City Center now. Tons and tons of concerts, monster truck rallies, all that type of stuff inside the Food City Center at Thompson Bowling Arena, and you can find all the perfect last-minute tickets for great prices over at the Game Time app. So what I encourage you to do is download that Game Time app. Create an account. If you're looking on the screen right now here on YouTube, it's super, super easy to use. And create an account. Use the promo code VOLS, and you're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code VOLS, VOLS, for $20 off at Game Time. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And as always, we want to give a big shout out and a big thank you to our presenting sponsor of the Volquest podcast. That is Exterior Home Solutions.
Your roof, it's the most important protection against nature for your home or your business. That's why I trust the experts at Exterior Home Solutions.
Big thanks as always to our friends Exterior Home Solution for making this coverage possible. Go ahead and give them a call today at 865-524-5888 or visit them online, exteriorhomesolutions.com. All right, so great perspective from A&M from David there, who just joined us on the Volquest podcast. We'll continue on, Mailbag podcast, Rocky Top, Roundtable, GameQuest podcast, all that and more, plus all of our written work. Let's look around the SEC. Tennessee football was off this past weekend, a chance to watch and take in a whole lot of football. Brent Hubbs, let's go ahead and start with this A&M and Alabama game. It was at home for A&M. Alabama wins this one, but I think, and David kind of mentioned it there, I think the biggest surprise was, hey, Alabama threw the football down the field a lot, and Jalen Milroe to Burton and some of those other guys. I don't think anybody kind of saw that coming, and if Milroe can hit on some of those plays, and he has that ceiling that's so much higher than Buckner or Simpson, Alabama looks as dangerous as ever.
Well, I mean, I think anybody writing the Alabama obituary a couple of weeks ago was obviously premature in doing that, which is not a surprise. My biggest takeaway from that game, though, Grant and Rob, was the fact that DJ Durkin, the defensive coordinator for Texas A&M, played single safety high and played man coverage on the outside. I think if you watch Jalen Milroe play against Texas in a game that he basically lost his job, he had a hard time reading the field and seeing the field. He threw into double coverage. He didn't read safeties very well. I thought A&M made it easier for Milroe throwing the football because he could throw 50-50 balls, Grant, because it was a lot of one-on-one on the outside. and not a whole lot of kind of read the field, read coverage type stuff. I was surprised that that's the way A&M elected to play him defensively, really the entire game, and Alabama figured it out in the second half.
It feels like there's always an obituary written about Alabama prematurely after a loss because I guess they just lose so rarely. But I mean, not only to lose to Texas, but to look the way they did at South Florida a week later and to shuffle quarterbacks the way they did. For Milroe to get the job back and to play like he did, and for them to go on the road and have, 14 penalties for close to 100 yards and a couple turnovers, and a lot of stuff didn't go very well for them in that game. Quite a bit of adversity on the road, 100,000, whatever the capacity is, and at Kyle Field, a tough place to play. And for them, I don't think they ran the ball very well against that Texas A&M front. So for Milroe to do that, to throw it the way they did, and to win in the fashion they did, overcoming some mistakes, the difference a couple weeks can make for a team, any team, especially Alabama, is crazy in this league.
Yeah, that's what I was going to add. They had 23 yards rushing. They averaged less than a yard per carry. If you'd have told me, and a lot of that was sack yardage, but even you take that out, they barely topped 50 yards. And if you'd have told me Alabama had 23 yards rushing and with Milroe at quarterback and score 26 points and win, I would have been skeptical, to say the least.
Rob McClellan had 45 yards on 12 carries. Williams had 9 yards on 6 carries. So Milroe got sacked a couple of times, minus 31. But to your point, even the running game, I mean, you weren't topping 50 yards. You didn't top 50 yards essentially by one guy. They struggled to run the football.
Well, so Rob, my question is that more of a credit to Alabama for finding a way to win, or more of a disappointment from Texas A&M that you couldn't win that football game when you stymied the run game and had the sacks that you had, yet you didn't, and they had Alabama had all the self-inflicted wounds, and yet you still couldn't find a way to beat them?
Well, I think it's a disappointment for Texas A&M, but also, I mean, what you were just talking about with Durkin, I mean, he was rolling the dice, and Milroe beat him. I mean, they couldn't run the football, and pretty clearly Durkin wanted to put it all on Milroe's shoulders, and he made enough throws, and Bama's receivers made enough plays down the field to make A&M pay for it.
Did we learn more about Georgia or Kentucky, Grant, in that football game? Was it Georgia? Okay, Georgia's, back to being Georgia, or was it Kentucky? Well, Kentucky's not as good as we thought they were because you actually played somebody with a pulse. 51-13, Georgia made quick work of Kentucky.
I think it's a little bit of both, but I would go more so Georgia. It felt like Georgia was kind of playing with its food a little bit the first however many games before Saturday night. And obviously going to Athens, a night game, facing that kind of talent, that team, what they've done the last couple of years. I don't think Kentucky's dead. I don't think Kentucky's probably as bad as they looked at Georgia. I don't think Tennessee last year was as bad as they looked at times at Georgia. I think it's just a really tough team, and it felt like the first time we've seen Georgia kind of look like Georgia, the Georgia that everybody expected, the Georgia that wasn't really messing around with the slow start that got after, 34-7 at halftime, to be able to get out to that fast start at home. They finally looked like the team I thought everybody was expecting.
I mean, Brent, Devin Leary was missing wide open guys in that first half. Just wide open guys. Obviously, Ray Davis couldn't run it as successfully as he did the week before against Florida. But I still think we're kind of just perplexed a little bit, thinking that the quarterback play for Kentucky was going to be much better than what it's been to this point.
Well, Leary's just not done what Kentucky fans were hoping that he would do when he transferred out of NC State. Of course, he had the injury, and I think that there's still suspect, Rob, with their weapons on the outside. There's still some young guys there. I don't think that they're necessarily dynamic. The two penalties they had were just colossal, horrible penalties in the first quarter on offense to stop drives. And then Georgia cut it loose, right? I mean, Georgia decided, hey, we're not going to beat our head against the wall running the football. If you're going to play off coverage, we'll just raise up and throw it. And all of a sudden they got balance, and that game just got away from Kentucky before Kentucky even knew what hit them. But Leary has just not played nearly to what anybody in the Bluegrass State thought that he might.
Yeah, I would
look at Arkansas and Ole Miss. Boy, Rob, Arkansas has now dropped 4 straight. Been some close calls in there, but 4 straight. I think the biggest loss in that span was to A&M, and that was 10 or 11. I can't remember. But anyway, another close loss, losing to Ole Miss. Now Ole Miss 5-1 on the year. Still that one loss to Alabama a couple weeks ago. And then for Arkansas, you've got Alabama next week, so that losing streak's probably going to grow to another game at 5 straight.
Yeah, I mean, just I don't know how good anybody really thought Arkansas was going to be, but it feels pretty ugly right there. Right, 0-3 in the SEC. I'm sure they had some opportunities against Texas A&M and bungled it. Played Ole Miss kind of close, but man, I mean, you mentioned it. The schedule is not getting any easier for them at all. I mean, it's not like they played a murderer's row to start the SEC their first 3 weeks. So, man, I think it could get pretty bad there in Fayetteville.
Well, what's interesting to me, Grant, about them is KJ Jefferson's not any better than he was 2 years ago. It doesn't feel like.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think he's got a ton of weapons around him, but he's not. He's not. The quarterback development there with him has not been very good. And I think the loss of Barry Odom on the defensive side of the ball was a significant loss for Arkansas, because Arkansas isn't going to outscore a lot of people anyway with the way they played offensive football. I think those two things are really, really significant in putting Arkansas in the position they're in right now.
I think the worst thing you can say about Arkansas is Ole Miss beat you by 7, and Ole Miss isn't really that happy about it. Like, to be down early in the fourth quarter against against Arkansas, what was it, 20-17, something like that? Looks like a game that Arkansas might sneak up and get them. I think you want style points against an Arkansas team that's struggling, and for Ole Miss to get that, Ole Miss looking for a response of their own to their first loss of the season. So I think that's the worst thing you can say about Arkansas. It's going to be it's just the halfway point for them, and it's going to get a lot worse. It's going to be a long season of hot boards and private jet tail tracking and all that stuff in Fayetteville.
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong in terms of the weapons, Brad. I don't think Arkansas has really had a receiver since Treylon Burks, right? I mean, you got Rocket Sanders, great running back. You got a quarterback that's been there a decade, and KJ Jefferson, who you think's a pretty good weapon, but in terms of receivers out on the perimeter, you don't have really anybody you can hang your hat on.
No, you don't. And Arkansas's got some other things working against them too, Rob. I mean, I love Sam Pittman, but Sam Pittman went on a rant about social media a couple of weeks ago and, was pretty defensive and kind of got after fans about that. And his offensive coordinator emails fans back who sent him emails.
That's an all-timer right there.
It really is.
I mean, none of those things, if you're winning, those things don't come to play. Nobody talks about that stuff, right? But if you're going to go into a tailspin and you're losing, all that stuff gets magnified in a big time way. And I think that I think the pressure is mounting in Fayetteville. There's a lot of people who are not going to be real quiet because they feel like that, in some ways the coaching staff has challenged them publicly. And that's just not a public fight that you want to get into if you're a college football coach. And those two, that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt them in a pretty bad way, I think, over the course of this month.
I agree. I mean, I think we all dealt with Coach Pittman. I don't know, Eric might have been still in grade school, but he was, a really good dude. I mean, one of the best guys that's been through here. And, for him, and I'm sure he had a tremendous amount of goodwill with Arkansas fans, more than a guy who would put up the wins and losses that he had, probably would, if not for his personality. But by taking on the fans in this day and age with social media like that, that's just, I would say a lot of goodwill has evaporated.
Here's the nicest thing I'll say about Arkansas, since I said the meanest thing. They got Tennessee on schedule next year, so somehow they'll be 8-0 when they play Tennessee, and they'll have 3 Heisman Trophy candidate running backs and 2 Biletnikoff front runners at wide receiver and some 6'5" quarterback slinging it all over the place. And Belichick will retire from the Patriots and become associate head coach at Arkansas, just because Tennessee's on the schedule.
Yes, that's a great
Usually
point.
how it works. You got Tennessee and Auburn, who did not play, were off. Mississippi State, only 13 points over Western Michigan. Florida, Vanderbilt, who cares about that game? The last game I want to highlight here is, I was wrong on LSU. I thought LSU was going to be a whole lot better than what LSU was, and there were a lot of people like me in that camp. That defense, Grant, what defense is showing up? There's no defense for LSU right now, and Missouri's better. Missouri is better. We knew Missouri was going to be better defensively, or kind of came in the season okay defensively, but Brady Cook's been making some plays. 39 points in a loss to LSU. That's a high scoring game, and I couldn't imagine LSU being this bad before the season started.
Maybe it's just because the games I've watched Missouri where it's Heupel putting 60 plus on them the last couple of years, or I don't know. I just never trust Missouri. 5-0 start's great. That's just, but you got to see a little bit more than that, more tests that they got to pass. LSU is one of those tests where you got to pass that test to be legit. And you just don't trust it. You don't believe it until you see it. And obviously, I never really bought into LSU all that much last year because last year we saw them on their worst day their worst 60 minutes of football, whatever, and they beat Alabama at home later in the year. But I just didn't trust Missouri because I just haven't seen it the last couple of years to make me believe they might be headed in the right direction, but how quickly they're going to get there and how long it's going to take them to be a legit threat in this league. I just have to see it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Rob, when you look at this matchup here, this thing here, there's a couple of things that stand out to me. One, this Missouri-Kentucky game coming up this week is going to be really interesting because I don't think that you know what you know about either one of those teams. This is another find it out, week with those two teams, despite, their fast start. And then two, my worst hot take of the year was the notion that Spencer Rattler was playing the best football of any quarterback in the SEC, coming out of the Mississippi State game, heading into the Tennessee game. Jaden Daniels, best player in this league right now on offense. He should be everybody's front runner for the Heisman. He probably won't be, but he should be because there's nobody's more valuable to their team right now than Jaden Daniels because LSU feels like they got to score on every possession. And that's basically what he did in the fourth quarter for them to get that win. Man, he's playing really good football.
Not as much in third. They scored 32 points in the second half, trailing. And every time LSU needed him to make a play, I watched pretty much all the second half. It just seemed like he did. Even came back from the injury tent to lead a scoring drive. I thought he was pretty good last year, but man, he's taken a step this year, and he is. And don't dismiss him just as a dual threat guy that's looking to run and get out of the pocket. He made some big time throws down the field on Saturday.
Hey, but here's the thing: he takes at least one shot every game. Where you're like, oh my god, he's not going to get up. They get him rattled every single game, man. They got to protect him because. Brent, to your point, he's playing some great football right now, but the blocking up front, man, they're not doing him much favors at times.
Well, if they don't keep him healthy, that's going to be a really, really ugly football team the back half of this season if he can't stay well because they just can't do a whole lot without him on the field. And so I think that's going to be a vital. He's the ultimate bubble wrap guy. But the problem is his game is not bubble wrap game because he uses his legs the way that they do. So I think that one's going to be interesting. And then my last thing from the league as we wrap it up get ready to wrap it up is the game management and the officiating in this league for the amount of money that's being spent, the amount of money the league makes, Grant, the amount of money that's being spent at schools for these coaches to make that amount, the amounts they make, and the 40 guys they have on the sidelines in golf shirts telling everybody what they're supposed to be doing. There's some of the most head-scratching things to watch. It's just crazy to see. And that stood out in clarity on Saturday in watching everybody in the SEC play.
Some accountability would be nice. Even in the NBA, if there's a final 2-minute report just about, I think in every single NBA game where they go over every call and they admit mistakes and they admit whatever should have happened, didn't happen. That would be nice just to have some accountability to go back and to put out something officially that says this call was missed here, this call was missed here, whatever. And you could know which crews are missing these calls and which guys are your most consistent offenders and where these crews rank compared to the others. Everybody else is accountable, head coaches, players, assistant coaches, everybody. Everybody talks to the media after games, assistant coaches, head coaches, everybody. It would be nice to get some accountability from their side of it too, because it's bad. It's bad across a bunch of sports. It's not just football, it's basketball as well. And no accountability. It feels like there's no way to fix it.
I'm just baffled by some of the decisions that we see. I'm just not just in the SEC, but just around college football. It's crazy. The coach from Arizona didn't know you had to go for 2 after the second overtime.
Yep.
He didn't know the rule.
That rule's now 3 years old.
It doesn't matter. He's got 47 people in a coaching shirt to tell him what the rule is. They put the graphic up during the TV broadcast that's on in every coaching booth up there. Surely some analyst knew, hey, you're supposed to go for 2 here. Don't stand the kicking.
Hey, Donovan and McNabb had no idea how the NFL overtime worked years ago. They tied, remember? The overtime period ended and just ended at a tie, and McNabb was shocked. But, hey, to your credit on your Spencer Rattler take a couple weeks ago, it's not your fault you didn't I mean, who would have seen South Carolina being somebody's Super Bowl, a week ahead of time?
That's true.
The
That is
mighty
true.
South Carolina Gamecocks.
It was a
Super
nice
Bowl material.
It was a nice parade, that's for sure.
All right, we will close up shop here on this edition of the Volquest podcast. Appreciate you guys for being here, taking it in with us through the very end, for watching on YouTube. Pound that like button. Let's subscribe to the channel if we haven't already. Most importantly, though, if you're listening right now, you're not a member over at Volquest.com, hey, it's about to get real this back half of the schedule. Tennessee's got 7 regular season games left. A huge month of October awaits, and you can find the best coverage for UT athletics, but UT football right now. That is at Volquest.com. A big thanks to Exterior Home Solutions for making this coverage possible. For a free estimate, give them a call today. That's at 865-524-5888. As always, you can visit them online at exteriorhomesolutions.com. For Rob Lewis, Grant Ramey, and Brent Hubbs, I am Eric Kane. Thank you so much for being here and listening to the Volquest podcast.